What's going on, everybody? I wasn't planning on doing a video today, but I just really felt convicted to jump on here and share some stuff I've been studying. Man, the past couple months, I've really just been feeling in my spirit that there's this really awesome connection that we can see in the Old Testament to the New Testament, New Testament to the Old Testament. And today I was on a forum, and I saw several people in there saying, hey, how do we know that the Old Testament writers weren't just hearing voices and that's what their God was and they just wrote this stuff down? And also, I've heard on a couple podcasts, and recently I heard this on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Joe was making the claim that the Old Testament writers and the people of old were just taking magic mushrooms, and that's what they were hearing and seeing, and that's what they were writing down, and that's the experience they were having, such as the burning bush that Moses saw and whatnot. So I kind of started diving into this because I was like, I really don't feel like I have done a deep dive into this, and I just really wanted to spend some time like diving into this. So I do have to give some credit to one of my favorite pastors, Pastor Jeff Durbin, down in Tempe, Arizona. He did a message on this a couple weeks ago, and it really inspired me to dig into it for myself. So what I'm trying to do is to encourage you to also, search this out for yourself. I'm going to be sharing some scripture with you that just barely touches the surface of this topic. But I do think it's really interesting how you do have messianic prophecies in the Old Testament that are pointing to Christ. And then Christ is also saying things that are pointing back to the Old Testament. So making that connection. It's really interesting. We live in the year 2024 where we have Google and we have all these things where we could do all this research and whatnot. But you have to understand that in the time that Christ was around in the Old Testament, information and data was not being shared like it is now. So, I've heard people saying, oh, well, how do we know that they didn't just write this stuff and then in the future people read those articles and just self-fulfilled these prophecies? And I suppose that could be true. Highly doubtful, with the lack of information that was being spread around. I mean, it wasn't like people had the Bible, and it wasn't like people had these scrolls just hanging out at their house. They were usually kept at the temple. And yes, I do understand that a lot of these people did go to the temple and did have a lot of the Old Testament scrolls memorized. But I don't know. That's just really kind of hard to believe. Anyways, let's just dive right into it. We're going to start off with Micah 5:2, which is pretty cool. But it says, but you, Bethlehem, though you are small amongst the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old and from ancient times. Now, this is saying that, hey, in the future, there's going to be a ruler that's going to rule over Israel. And this is going to be from a person from old times. It's like talking about God. Pretty awesome. So it's kind of like a dual prophecy saying that, hey, this is God from old times. It's going to be in the future. And it's also cool because it's talking about Bethlehem in here, which, of course, we all know that that's the birthplace of Christ. Even more specific, Nazareth, which is in Bethlehem area. Anyway, so that's a pretty cool passage there. So then obviously moving forward into the future, into the Gospels, we see that Christ is being born in Bethlehem. Pretty cool. This one's pretty cool in Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 through 7. It says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward and forever. And the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Really awesome, because you got to understand, again, the people who are writing this Old Testament scrolls and prophecies were monotheistic Jews. They believed in one God. And yet, in here, in this prophecy, these people who believe in one God are saying in the future, there is going to be a child born, a son given to us. And then a couple sentences down, this child, this son, this human is going to be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Yahweh. Pretty cool. So, again, this is kind of going back to these, did they just hear voices and mushrooms? I mean, if they are hearing voices and tripping out on mushrooms, these things are pointing in the right direction, if you will. So, very interesting. Let's see here. Moving on to Isaiah 53. This is a long one. Again, I really encourage you guys to go back and read all of these. The first one again was Micah 5:2, and we just read from Isaiah 9, and we're about to read from Isaiah 53 right now. Let's see here. Oh yeah. Okay, sorry guys. I had all this highlighted, and now it's kind of disappearing for me. All right, so I encourage you to go back and read all of Isaiah 53. But it said, surely he took up our pain and he bore our sufferings, yet he we considered him punished by God, stricken of him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions and he was crushed for our iniquities. Now, just full stop there. Pastor Durbin pointed out that this was like 500 years. Hold on, let me check that real quick. Isaiah. Yep, about 550 years before Christ comes on to the scene. So, crucifixion was not a thing at that time. It had not happened. The Roman legions and Rome had not started doing crucifixions yet. It was just not at that point in history where crucifixions were happening. So it's pretty amazing language to be using, that this forthcoming Messiah, this man who's going to take our iniquities, who's going to bear our pain, is going to be pierced for our transgressions. That's pretty amazing. So again, we have these prophecies that are pointing forward to Christ. And these are the things that people are saying are the voices that people heard in their head, or the mushroom trip that they were on, are all pointing to the future, to this Messiah. Okay. Moving on. This one really trips me out. Psalm 22. I hadn't really read this passage before, and Pastor Durbin, like I said a couple weeks ago, read it, and as soon as he started reading it, I was like shocked. It almost brought me to tears, because I didn't know that when Christ was on the cross, there's a point where he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Before he's ultimately killed and taken to the grave. This is Psalm 22. This is, let's see here. When was this one written? Oh yeah, 1,000 years before Christ comes on the scene. You ready? My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? Man, I can almost not read that without... It's crazy. And then moving down to like verse 12, it says, many bulls have surrounded me, strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me, roaring lions that tear, they prey, they open their mouth wide against me. This is crazy. I am poured out like water, and my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It has melted within me. My mouth is dried up like whatever that is, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. People stare and they gloat over me. They divide my clothes among me, and they cast lots for my garment. This is Psalm 22. This is 1,000 years before Christ comes on the scene. So I'm just going to come out and say, okay, if these are just voices and mushroom trips, and they're just writing this stuff down, those are some pretty crazy voices, and those are some crazy mushrooms, because they are predicting all of the things that we see thousands and hundreds of years later down the road when it comes to Christ. Now, some people are going to say, hey, but Christ is not real, so this is all just a made-up story. Okay, I guess you could say that, but that's a whole nother podcast, getting into the evidence of Christ. You know, you have a lot of external documentation about Christ being a real man and someone who was crucified. I encourage you guys to go out and research this yourself. But I do find it funny that anytime research is being done, people will use all sorts of resources for their research. Okay? But then when people will use the Bible for self-research to establish, they say, no, you can't use the Bible. But I don't know. Anyways, pet peeve. Anyway, so it's really interesting because then, like I said, you know, so you have the Old Testament pointing towards Christ. So it's funny because like these people were saying, oh, it's just voices in their head, and it's just magic mushrooms are taking and having a trip, and that's what they're hearing and seeing God and writing this stuff down. Okay. So, but if we move forward, these voices are saying, hey, in the future, there's going to be the voice that we're hearing is going to turn into a human being. And then we see this human being come in the form of Jesus. And what does that human being, Jesus, say about himself? Well, in John, they come to him and say, you know, hey, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. You know, that's in John 14. And then also, you see later, the Pharisees saying, who are you? And Christ is saying, you know, Abraham foretold me coming, and he was excited. And they said, hey, you're only 50 years old. Did you see Abraham? And he said, before Abraham, I am. So he's literally saying, I am the Christ. Pretty amazing stuff. He also said, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door of the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection. I am the way. I am the true vine. These things are all pretty amazing. So I just think it's pretty cool that in the Old Testament, you see messianic prophecies pointing to Christ, saying who he's going to be, where he's going to be, when he's going to come. And in fact, there was one, hey Django, I'm doing a podcast here, buddy. My dog. Lay down. Thank you, buddy. I want to go back to Daniel real quick because this is pretty cool. This is a whole nother podcast we could do, but in Daniel 9, it says, 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring an everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So this is a prophecy saying that, hey, in this time period, the Messiah is going to come. And that's a whole other podcast we can do, but it's talking about the destruction of the Second Temple, which happened in 70 AD. And, you know, so it's interesting because the last messianic prophecy that we see in the Old Testament came about 400 years before Christ. And then you see that there's this prophecy in Daniel saying that when the Second Temple is destroyed, the Messiah would have been already cut off before that. And that happened in 70 AD. So the Messiah had to come somewhere between 400 BC to 70 AD, somewhere in that time period. If the Messiah did not come during that time period, there is no Messiah. So it's really cool. Jesus fits the time, he fits the place, he fits the person, he fits all of the Messianic prophecies you see in Isaiah about how he will die, the things that he will do, the things that he will say. It's really an amazing thing. So at the end of the day, what I hear is a lot of people saying the Bible is not true. And I think that that's a very broad stroke that a lot of people do in a lot of things. I'm guilty of it myself. I say this thing is always that way, or this thing is always that way. And you'll just hear people say broad stroke, the Bible is just made up, it's not true. But, you know, if you really start looking at archaeological evidence, historical evidence, Messianic evidence, and all sorts of different things on all sorts of different angles, you can't say that it's not true completely. If you want to say, hey, the spiritual aspects of the Bible are not true, I respectfully disagree, but go ahead, you can have that argument. But to say it's not archaeologically true is wrong. I mean, I've been blown away several times where I'll just be reading scripture. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I think it's one of Abraham's wives, maybe Sarah. I don't know. I'm completely wrong on the names. But anyways, there was one of the Old Testament fathers, and his wife died, and he built a grave to her. And literally in the scripture it says, the gravestone is there to this very day. And I was like, okay, like, could it really be there to this very... I think it's Rebecca. It's either Rebecca or Sarah. Anyways, could it really be there? And I went and Googled it, and sure enough, it is actually there to this day. I really think it's Rebecca. Let me Google it real quick. Let's see here. The tomb of Rebecca. Yes, that's my little searching song. Yep. Yeah, so there's like the tombs of the patriarchs where like Abraham and all of them are. It's so crazy because people are like, oh, these people didn't exist. The Bible's made up. Man, go research a lot of the Old Testament writers. Abraham, Jacob's well is there. The tomb of the patriarchs. It's really, they found Sodom and Gomorrah. They've recently found King David's area of the Temple Mount. They're finding all sorts of things from Solomon. I mean, it's... So to sit here and say the Bible's not true, well, that aspect of it is true. The archaeological elements of it is true. So if that's true, could there be other things that are true in it? I mean, I personally believe that the Bible's infallible, obviously. I have a bias in that, but, you know, I'm not just saying that just to say that, you know, like, I have a passion for truth and just knowing truth and knowing that I know. You know, I don't want to just like be like, oh, I believe in this thing just because a blind faith. I don't believe that. I do think that there are things we could have faith in that we don't necessarily see. But man, yeah. Anyways, I just want to encourage you to maybe not just say, hey, the Bible is completely false. Start with going and looking at some of the archaeological things. If you are a non-believer or having doubts, go look at those things, because those things are true in the Bible. And start there and say, hey, man, you know, if these things are true, maybe there's some other things that are true. Anyways, I hope that was encouraging for you, because yeah, I just keep hearing a lot of people saying the Bible's not true, or that, hey, how do we know that these people in the past weren't just having a hallucination or hearing voices? Well, if they were hearing voices or having hallucination trips, man, I mean, they were pretty spot on, in my opinion. yeah, anyways, I just wanted to share that today with you guys. I hope that's encouraging. And again, I definitely encourage you to go check this stuff out for yourself, for sure. Like I said, Pastor Durbin has a message he did a couple weeks ago. I think it's called Proof of the Messiah. Pretty awesome. Go check it out. I'm not a preacher. I just love to encourage and to teach the things that I'm learning and to deep dive and to check stuff out. So I'm hoping to do a lot more videos of just encouraging people, talking about Bible topics, and we'll see what happens. Anyways, have an awesome day. I do want to share one more thing. A couple days ago, I was reading Ecclesiastes. This is a little kind of side nugget. It was really awesome because Solomon was the most wisest man of all time. So says the Bible. I mean, people are going to debate that because whatever. Anyways, and I'm reading Ecclesiastes, and he's like, I have been to the highest of highs, I've been to the lowest of lows, I've had the most riches, I've had the most wisdom, I've had the most knowledge, I've had all this stuff. And at the end of the day, life has one meaning: respect and honor God. And then he also said, have a good meal, have a good drink, not too much, and be merry, be happy. So I just want to encourage you with your friends, with your family, more with your family, your spouse, your children. Have a good meal. Have a nice Italian soda. Be happy. Just lavish as much love as you possibly can on them. Be joyful. Be happy. Life is short. And I really grabbed onto that because I was like, yeah, man, like, let's start cooking some good meals and just sitting around the table and enjoying each other's company and being joyful for the love that we have in our lives, for the family, for the friends that we have, for the relationships that we have, for the people that we encounter. Man, it was just really inspiring that this greatest man that ever walked the planet as far as wisdom said, all of that just means absolutely nothing. Life is a vapor. Love God, honor God, have a good meal, and love those around you. Anyways, have a blessed day. Take that with you and act accordingly.